Everyone, and welcome to a lecture about pelvis. So today we're going to be talking about the bony pelvis, the pelvic wall and the floor muscles, the sciatic foramen, the pelvic organs, very briefly, the blood supply of the pelvis, and the lumbosacral plexus. تمام? So I'll split it into two videos. The first video will probably stop the sciatic foramen, and then هنعمل blood supply والlumbosacral plexus في the second video. تمام؟ pelvic organs, I'm not sure either they're going to be in the first or second video. على حسب التايمينج. So as I usually say, إن إحنا we're trying to cover the most important topics or the things that are most common في الامتحان. So our most focus is going to be on the blood supply. It's going to be on the sciatic foramen أكتر حاجة. While the bony pelvis and the lumbar plexus also get lumbosacral plexus also get priority. However, the wall and the floor muscles are not that important, and the pelvic organs are also not as commonly asked, so they're not going to be covered in details. So first of all, we will start with the bony pelvis. The bony pelvis, we have, you need to know that the pelvis has 3 bones. So it's formed of 3 bones connected together. There's the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. So the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis, all 3 of them are joined together to form the pelvis. And they're joined in an area which is known as the acetabulum. So the acetabulum is a connection between all 3 pelvic bones. And basically the one that's at the top here is the ilium, and then the one that's at the front here is the pubis, and then this one here is the ischium. So again, I'll repeat it again. Here, that's the ilium. This tiny one is the pubis, the one that's small that goes to the front. And then this one, the one that posteriorly, is the ischium. Okay? This is basically the easiest way to explain what the bones are formed of. There's one more. There's bones connected to the pelvis, which are the sacral bone and the coccygeus bone. So it's not just those 3, it's also with the sacral and coccygeal bones as well, which are part of the vertebral column. They also form the posterior part of the pelvis. So, برضو it's important for you guys to know the joints of the pelvis and the ligaments of the pelvis. They're very important. So we'll start with that. We'll start with each bone individually and what components are of the bone. These are just important for you to recognize each one because it's very important في الامتحان, especially في امتحان DR. They always give you one of these bones and they would label one part. So I'll just be quickly going through parts of each bone. So عندنا أول حاجة الإليوم. الإليوم is formed of فيه iliac crest, which is this boundary here. I think it'll be better if I highlight it. So this كده is the iliac crest. These are posterior anterior views. So the anterior view, the posterior view, the iliac crest. في تاني iliac fossa, which is found anteriorly. Here, this is the iliac fossa. في تاني spines. There's 4 spines في الإليum, but we're only going to be talking about an anterior superior iliac spine, which is here. في تاني posterior superior, posterior inferior, or anterior inferior. But the one that's more important or most commonly asked about is the anterior superior iliac spine. And sometimes they would ask you what also attaches to the anterior superior iliac spine, and one of the structures that attach to the anterior superior iliac spine is the inguinal ligament. So it's very important to remember that an anterior superior iliac spine is an area of attachment of the inguinal ligament. Then we have the gluteal lines, which are found on the posterior surface. There are 3, but again the most important one is the anterior gluteal line. There's also the posterior and the inferior gluteal line, posterior inferior gluteal line, but the one that's more important is the anterior gluteal line. Okay? So again, quickly going again through the ilium, we've got the iliac crest, which is this. We've got the iliac fossa, which is this fossa here, or like opening, groove or depression here. Depression. We've got the spines, but most importantly the anterior superior iliac spine, which is here, or like here if you're going posteriorly. So anterior superior iliac spine. We've got the gluteal lines, which are posteriorly, and the most important one of them is the anterior gluteal line. It's found here, and they're areas of attachment for gluteal muscles. Okay, so these areas are very important to recognize. Next, we're gonna go to the ischium, and again, just to quickly review which bone it is, it's this one. So it's the one that's found at the back. It's this bone. This one. And yeah, so first I'll just draw a line here just to stop you, like, can disconnect the ischium with the pubis so that you guys don't get confused, so that you guys can see it clearly. Okay, so here as well, I'll just try to cut it again just to make it more clear. Right, so the ischium has a body, and yeah, it has a tuberosity, a spine, and a ramus. Okay, so I'll start with the, sorry, yeah, so basically the body of the ischium, and then there's a tuberosity, a spine, and the ramus. Okay, so the ramus is basically this part, which is connecting with the pubis. Okay, and the pubis always also has a ramus, and together they form something that's known as the ischiopubic ramus. And in the tuberosity, which is found posteriorly, which is right here, this is the ischiotuberosity. We also have a spine that is found about here, برضه posteriorly, known as the ischial spine. So دي الحاجات الفيتشرز المهمة: the ischial spine, the ischial tuberosity, and the ischial ramus, which connects with the pubic ramus, and then the rest of the ischium is just known as the body. Okay, so yeah, I'll repeat again. There's the body, which is just the main bulk of it. There's the tuberosity and spine, which are found at the back. This is tuberosity, and this is the spine. Okay, then we have the ramus, which is an extension that is connected to the pubis. So it's called an ischial ramus. This part is called an inferior pubic ramus, and together we can call them the ischiopubic ramus. Okay, and then as I said, there's the spine. The spine, one of the things about the spine is that the spine is where you sit on. So if you're sitting on your ischial spine. It's just one of those facts. Okay, so next we'll be doing the pubis. And the pubis is also similar to the ischium. So again, we'll be labeling it. This is the pubis up here. If you're looking anteriorly, this is the pubis. Then if you're looking from posterior, this is the pubis. Okay. So again, we'll be cutting the area between the pubis and the ischium because it's not that visible. We can also cut here to make the difference between the pubis and the ilium, but I don't think it's that necessary. Okay, so then we've got the parts. We've got the pubic crest, which is here. Got the pubic tubercle, which is more posteriorly. So crest and tubercle. And then we've got the two rami, okay? So the two rami are important. There's the superior ramus connecting with the ilium, and then there's a inferior ramus connecting with the ischium. So again, with the ischium, there's an ischiopubic ramus, which is an inferior pubic ramus, and then a superior pubic ramus, which is the one that's connecting with the ilium. There's also a pectineal line, which is a line guide في البيوبس, which is this line here. تمام. So يعني البيوبس ده فيه crest, pubic crest, و superior ramus, inferior ramus, و pectineal line. تمام. A superior and inferior ramus are there for connection with the other bones. So the superior ramus connects with the ilium, while the inferior ramus connects with the ischium. This is basically, in a simple way, the three bones that are forming our pelvis, which are the ischium, pubis, and ilium. Together, they'll join together. There'll be joints between them. As I also already mentioned, they'll connect with the sacrum. So they'll form joints between them, and between the sacrum, and there's also ligaments to help with stabilizing it. So the joints, عندنا sacroiliac joint, which is between the sacrum and the iliac crests, or iliac, the ala of the ilium, or like the bodies of the ilium. So yeah, the sacroiliac joint connects between the sacrum and the ilium, and it's a plain synovial joint, so that means it's a movable joint. However, it is stabilized by a ligament, which makes it immobile. يعني a sacroiliac joint is supposedly a mobile joint, a plain synovial joint, but it is more stabilized by the sacroiliac ligaments, making it not as mobile. Okay? في تاني sacrococcygeal joint, which is between the sacrum and the coccygeals, and it's a secondary cartilaginous joint. There's also a symphysis pubis, which is here, and the symphysis pubis is between the two pubic bones, or also technically between the two pelvic bones, and it is the also secondary cartilaginous. One way to remember this is that any joint that's found in the midline of the body is a secondary cartilaginous joint, starting from the joints of the sternum to the joints of the intervertebral discs to the intervertebral joints, sorry. So the intervertebral joints, as well as the sacroiliac joint, sacrococcygeal joint, and also the symphysis pubis. كلهم, since they're found in the midline of the body, في النص, they're secondary cartilaginous. It's just a rule. If you memorize it, it makes it a lot easier for you to remember. So yeah, to repeat again really quickly, عندنا ثلاثة joints that are important في pelvis: a sacroiliac joint between the sacrum and the iliac, and ilium, and they are plain synovial. However, they are stabilized by ligaments, which makes them not as movable. في تاني a sacrococcygeal, which is secondary cartilaginous between the sacrum and the coccygeal bone. في تاني a symphysis pubis, which is secondary cartilaginous برضو between the two pubic bones. So this is the symphysis pubis. These two are secondary cartilaginous because all of the joints in the midline are secondary cartilaginous. So it's a rule. تمام؟ تاني عندنا ligaments of the pelvis, and the ligaments of the pelvis are عندنا iliolumbar joint ligament, عندنا sacrotuberous ligament و sacrospinous ligament. And important الاثنين هم sacrotuberous و sacrospinous ديل. تمام؟ Like they're very important ligaments. So in their name you can tell which one is formed of which what and what. So the iliolumbar. Okay, so the last thing I said was we're talking about the ligaments of the pelvis, and the ligaments عندنا قلنا iliolumbar و sacrotuberous و sacrospinous. And from the name, you're able to recognize what it connects. So the iliolumbar connects the iliac crest with the fifth lumbar transverse process, while a sacrotuberous, which is more important, it connects the sacrum with the ischial tuberosity. Okay, so yeah, and the sacrospinous connects the sacrum with the ischial spine. So it's not that important to know which part of the sacrum exactly, but it's more important to know the tuberous and the spinous are both of the ischium specifically. So the ischial tuberosity and the ischial spine. Okay, and also it's useful to know which ones they are as well. So it's important to know that this one is the sacrospinous ligament. Sorry, this one is the sacrospinous ligament, and this one is the sacrotuberous ligament. And not just that, but also it's important to know that the sacrotuberous ligament specifically is one of the structures that form the sciatic foramen. So like the sciatic foramen is not a foramen unless the sacrotuberous ligament crosses it. Before that, it's not a foramen. Make sense? Yeah, the sacrotuberous ligament is the one that forms one of the boundaries of the sciatic foramen. And that's why it's important to know about it. So as you can see in this diagram here, it's forming the sciatic foramen. So it's very important to know about the sacrotuberous ligament specifically, and it's the most important one of them. طيب next عندنا pelvic wall floor and muscles. So the pelvic wall فيها two muscles اللي هم piriformis والobturator internus, while الفلور فيها what we call the pelvic diaphragm, which we'll talk about in a bit. فيلا piriformis والobturator muscles are, yes, they're important when it comes to as muscles, but they're more important when you're studying them in the lower limb region. So I'll go really quickly through them because you're already going to be redoing them for the lower limb. So في pelvis ما بيجوا كتير. Okay? So there's the piriformis muscle, which الorigin حقها في الsacrum, the insertion في greater trochanter of the femur, and its innervation is the nerve to piriformis, and we're going to be discussing all of the nerves of the pelvis later on. تاني الأكشن حقتها is the supporting the hip bone during abduction. Okay, so it supports the hip during abduction. في تاني obturator muscle, which is in the inner surface of the obturator membrane, obturator internus specifically, the inner surface of the obturator membrane and the obturator foramen. So it's from the inside of it, and its insertion in the greater trochanter of the femur, and its innervation is nerve to obturator internus, and its action is stability of the hip joint. Now, again, what's more important is in these two is just to recognize them for now, and when it comes to lower limb, you're supposed to know the actual origin innervation. Okay, innervation we're going to be discussing again later on today. This is the piriformis muscle, and this is the obturator internus muscle, and both of them are more important when it comes to them being contents of the sciatic foramen, which we'll mention again later. But yeah, the one that's actually more important here and we're more concerned with is the pelvic floor or the pelvic diaphragm. Now, the pelvic floor and the pelvic diaphragm is important for two reasons. You're supposed to recognize the muscle. So if it was labeled to you, you're supposed to recognize it because I think there's this model for DR where they would just label the muscle and they'd expect you to know it. And the second thing is that you're supposed to know what their functions are. Now, a function is very easy because their function is just to support the pelvic floor, and their function is also to form as sphincters to the prostate, vagina, and rectum. So they're supporting the prostate, the vagina, and the rectum. So okay, so that is a main idea of them. Okay, so عندنا أول واحدة is the levator ani muscle. Well, levator ani is divided into two. It's divided into pubococcygeus and iliococcygeus. Okay, so the pubococcygeus is the big one here. This is the pubococcygeus, while an iliococcygeus is just this part here. I'll draw them again with a better color just to make them more clear. This is the pubococcygeus, while this one is the iliococcygeus. Okay, and their origin is along the pelvic rim, so from the pubis, from the tendinous arch of the obturator fascia, and from the inner surface of the ischial spine, but not as important. And their insertion depends. It slings along one of those. It either slings around the vagina or slings around the rectum or slings around the prostate, and then it connects with. Okay, so basically the attachment of the muscles depends. So the upper two, which are the levator prostatae and the pubovaginalis, which are in the front, so they sling up about here. They insert into this thing we call the perineal body. Okay, so the perineal body is found in the midline, and it's basically like here, basically here, and it's just a fibrous tissue that's found in front of the anal canal. While the puborectalis, since it's going behind the anal canal, it'll also insert into a fibrous tissue, but it's in the back, which is known as the anococcygeal body. So yeah, the insertion is into two places, the perineal body and the anococcygeal body. Okay, don't bother too much with that detail, just know that it inserts in the midline, so it doesn't really insert to the back. Okay, then we've got, so again, repeating really quickly, we've got a levator ani muscle, which is pubococcygeus and iliococcygeus. And pubo is the one that's here, and it's slinging around areas. So the parts in males slings around the prostate and the rectum, while in females it's around the vagina and the rectum. And the front two, which are prostate and the vagina ones, they basically insert into the perineal body, which is in the midline. And there's the puborectalis, which inserts into the anococcygeal body, which is also in the midline but behind the anus. We've got the iliococcygeus, which are on the sides, and they're a little bit below pubococcygeus, and they also insert into the anococcygeal body, but also into the coccyx bone itself. Not that important, برضو. We've got another muscle other than the levator ani muscle. So the levator ani اللي هي pubococcygeus, iliococcygeus. والpubococcygeus ذاتها قسمناها levator prostatae, which stabilizes the prostate, pubovaginalis, which stabilizes the vagina, وpuborectalis, which stabilizes the rectum, right? تاني في قلنا iliococcygeus. تاني عندنا another complete different muscle اسمها coccygeus muscle. يلا. I'm not going to be talking about it, to be honest. It's not really that much of an area of question, so we're not going to be talking about it in details. فحسي ركزوا like mostly on the levator ani muscle. تمام? Know that one more thing is that the puborectalis is technically an sphincter itself, so it acts as a sphincter. It doesn't just stabilize. تمام? Okay, so next we'll be talking about the sciatic foramen. In the sciatic foramen, as I said, it's a very important area of question, very common area of question in both lower limb and pelvis. And we've got two foramens, the greater and the lesser sciatic foramen. Important things to know about them are their contents mostly. Okay, so the greater sciatic foramen, the contents of it are a lot, and we divide them even more furthermore into contents above piriformis muscle and contents below the piriformis muscle. So one of the contents, the first content we'll mention is the piriformis muscle, and then we'll say contents above and contents below. So the contents above the piriformis muscle are the superior gluteal vein, artery, and nerve, while everything else is below it. تمام? So piriformis, above it في superior gluteal vein, artery, nerve. Below it في inferior gluteal vein, artery, nerve. في pudendal nerve. ومع pudendal nerve it's artery and vein, which are called the internal pudendal artery and vein. في sciatic nerve. في nerve to obturator internus. Nerve to quadratus femoris. That's typo, it's a U. And posterior cutaneous femoral nerve. Okay? So let me fix that. Quadratus femoris. So again, الإن superior gluteal vein artery nerve, piriformis, inferior gluteal vein artery nerve, pudendal nerve, internal pudendal artery and vein, sciatic nerve, nerve to obturator internus, nerve to quadratus femoris, posterior cutaneous femoral nerve. تمام? So they كلهم are contents of the great sciatic foramen. What's more tricky is knowing the contents of the lesser sciatic foramen and the contents of both, because sometimes they mostly بيسألوا عن lesser دي. Like they be like, which ones are contents of both? So the contents of both are the pudendal nerve, والinternal pudendal artery and vein, والnerve to obturator internus. So دول الثلاثة دول they're contents of both. So pudendal nerve, internal pudendal artery and vein, and nerve to obturator internus are all contents of both the greater and the lesser sciatic foramen. If you want extra content of the lesser, which is not a content of the greater, اللي هي tendon of obturator internus. يعني all of the others are contents of the greater. لكن في contents بتكون في greater and lesser, which are pudendal nerve, and internal pudendal artery and vein, and nerve to obturator internus. And then there's one content which is only in the lesser and not found in the greater, which is a tendon of obturator internus. يعني simply remember there are no tendons in the greater one, but there is a tendon in the lesser. Everything else is in the greater, and then there's three that are also in the lesser, which are the pudendal, internal pudendal artery and vein, or nerve to obturator internus. تمام? This is basically in the simplest way a sciatic foramen.